Welcome back to the 21 Boom Guided Meditation Series. I am your host for the evening. I'll be your guide, Coach Zach Feeney. Um, we'll start right off. We'll kick it right off with the meditation part. So take a meditative posture, gently close your eyes, and give some attention to your spine. Maybe sit a little straighter, more alertly than you normally would. And that more alert spine perhaps will allow you a core or an inner strength around which you can relax. Take a few slow, long, deep breaths. As you breathe in, expanding outwards, stretching your rib cage, your shoulders, back rib cage. And then as you exhale, allowing whatever possible to relax around that core of the spine, keeping the spine alert. As you exhale, softening the shoulders. As you exhale, allowing the belly to be soft as well. And as you exhale, see if you can soften the muscles of your face. Then letting your breath return to normal. Scan through your body. See if there's some way that you can set your body at ease, staying upright with your spine, setting your body at ease. And then entering into the world of your breathing, into the way your body experiences breathing. For now, letting go of your thoughts and concerns so that you can better feel and sense the experience of breathing. Notice how inhalation feels different than exhalation. Now, either letting go of your thoughts or letting them recede in the background so that in the foreground of attention, you are with your breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. Giving yourself over to your breathing so that the breathing has a chance to settle you and calm you. So breathing can help center you as you center yourself around breathing. If you notice yourself thinking, for the next couple of moments, let go of that and reestablish yourself in the breathing. Now with a certain degree of calm and deliberateness, let go of your breathing. Let go of paying attention to your breathing, and now simply notice when you're thinking. You're welcome to think. No need to stop thinking now, but then as you're thinking, you're clearly aware that thinking is happening. Rather than letting go of thinking, look at your thoughts directly head on. If your thoughts fade away as you watch them, just wait until they come back or go back to your breathing, until such a time as thinking begins again. When it does clearly look at your thinking, see that it's happening, be aware of it. Very, very softly, whisper in the mind as you are aware of thinking occurring, label it or name it. Thinking, thinking, very softly. For the purposes of meditation, what you're thinking about is not important. But as we pay attention to thinking in meditation, you might notice other aspects of the process of thinking besides the content. So, for example, if you're thinking words or images, what's the quality of the inner voice? What's the quality of the pictures that you see? The inner voice that thinks, is it soft and gentle? Is it harsh, adamant? Is the inner voice critical or very accepting, easygoing? Is there a lot of energy to think, or is thinking very subtle? Are there any emotions connected to what you are thinking about? The process of thinking, is it connected with or comes out of any emotion? If there is, then quietly note the emotion. Include that in the awareness. If thinking goes away as you watch it, relax into the space that's left behind. Relax into the spaciousness of the quiet mind. And then as you notice your thinking, notice if there is any physical side to thinking. Is there any pressure or tension connected to thinking? Somewhere in the body, tightness, could be pressure in the brain, in the forehead, tension around the eyes, the jaws, holding in the shoulders, the chest. Is there some part of the body that feels activated in support of thinking as part of your thinking? Then is it possible to relax, soften any tension or pressure connected to thinking? Perhaps as you exhale, relaxing the thinking brain like you'd relax a muscle. Now, can you let go of your thinking enough to recenter yourself on your breathing? Let go of your thoughts, letting them recede to the background, and enter into the world of your breathing again, hanging in there with the breathing. So, if you can stay connected to a whole series of breaths in a row. Then, taking a couple of deep breaths, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Imagine yourself after a busy, stressful week, and so glad the weekend has arrived, and you're going for a nice hike. You're so glad to be out. You come to an edge of a river, a nice oak tree, sit next to the oak tree, have your picnic. Looking at the river, you perhaps take a little nap. Beautiful weather, nothing you need, nothing you want. You're so glad to be away from all the busyness of your life. All that running after the things and doing things, it's just so good to be there, to be content, to be alive, to be present. Wonderful to be there on the riverbank in the shade of the tree, watching the river go by. And then one of those showboats go by, flashing lights, casinos, dance shows, dancers, and everything. Pretty exciting. Next thing you know, you're on the boat and you've been on it for the last 24 hours and you didn't even know it. What happened to the riverbank? Somehow you managed to get ashore and get back to the tree. So happy to be back there, watching the river, content. And the next thing you know, you're on a warship that goes by and you've been fighting wars for a couple of days until you realize, wait a minute, how did I get on here? Then you get back on the shore, find your place by the tree again. And then this really poor, destitute raft comes by, and next thing you know, you're struggling for survival on this desperate little raft. And then you wonder, how did I get on here? So you go back ashore again and back to your oak tree. And all these boats go by, and after a while, you think, there must be a different thing to do besides getting on every boat that comes by. Why don't I just watch it? So you decide to stay here. I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to watch it go by. I'm going to see it, the shape of it, the color of it, what's going on. I'm not going to leave my place, my seat. I'm just going to let it go by. That analogy is sometimes used for thinking, that we establish ourselves in the shade of our breath, content and happy. And then sooner or later, some thoughts float by, comes along, and we don't even see it coming. We only know after a few minutes, hours, that we've been caught up in that particular thought world. A common one is planning. The word tomorrow bubbles up in your mind. And next thing you know, you're planning tomorrow, all the things you're going to do and say and eat and cook and everything. Spend a few hours planning. Or then a thought comes up about the past, and then you start living in the whole world of regrets or beautiful thoughts of how wonderful it was in the past. You live in the world of beauty of the past, but still you've gotten on the boat. And so much of life is lived on these boats of thinking. And some of them are beautiful and quite appropriate and healthy to be involved in. And some of them are quite painful and cause a lot of suffering to ourselves and to others. But even when they are healthy and good thoughts, they can also carry us down the river, and we can lose our spot on the riverbank where we are on solid ground and stable, centered. And we can be independent and free from all the things that are going on. One of the things we're trying to do in meditation practice is to find ourselves on the riverbank, solid with awareness, and learn to not get on the boats. You can't stop the boats going by, but you can not get on. You can't stop your thoughts, but you don't have to necessarily pick them up, get involved in them. In this regard, I make a distinction between the English word thinking and a new word, thoughting. Thoughting is what the mind does. It produces thoughts. You can't stop the mind from thoughting, but thinking is when you get involved in your thoughts. Then a train of associated thinking goes on, one after the other. You get involved and caught up in that world. So what we're trying to do is let the thoughts come up and just let them go by. It can seem rather impersonal, maybe a little bit uninteresting or very strange, because some people don't even know how much they are living in the world of thoughts and how much they meditate or see or understand their life through the filter of their thinking. They say that fish don't see the water they swim in. Humans don't see the thinking that they swim in. Part of mindfulness is to see this hugely important element of human life and to very clearly see it for what it is, and then have some choice of how we relate to it. Chances are most of us have not chosen much about how you relate to your thinking and how you get involved in thoughts. Some of you are probably a victim of your thinking mind. It takes you wherever it wants to go. Partly the reason for that is that some people believe that who they are is their thinking. Their identity is so closely tied to what they think about that it's a completely foreign idea that they should be something different than their thoughts. If they stopped thinking, who are they going to be? If you don't tell yourself stories about who you are, then who are you? It can be a little bit challenging. An important part of mindfulness is to really see the phenomenon of thinking. We're not at war with thinking. We're not necessarily trying to push it away or say it's bad, but some of them are painful. We're trying to see it from the vantage point of the riverbank as opposed to being in it or on it. From the vantage point of the riverbank, looking at the thinking, we might start noticing things we haven't noticed before about it. They're different than the content, the ideas, the thoughts, or the images. In that last meditation, I asked you to look a little bit. Could you notice some other aspects of thinking besides the content? Could you notice if there was some emotional quality to it? If you think with the words, what's the tone of or voice which you think with? Are there any physical aspects to your thinking? Meaning if you're really churning up a lot of thoughts, you can even see it in some people's forehead. They get all bunched up. The eyebrows bunch up. You see it. They're really thinking hard, the physical part of it. You ask someone to think about something they are really worried about, you can see the shoulders go up as they really bear down thinking about it, or their jaws clench up. Or you can't necessarily see it, but sometimes you can feel this energetic pressure or tension in the skull. I ask you to look if you notice any other aspects of thinking besides the content, and to just hang out looking at thoughts. I'd be curious to hear from some of you as to what happened when you included thinking as part of the field of attention, when you focused on it. Because if you're able to give some examples of some of the things that have happened, then we can respond and build on that. Every time you come back from thinking, you let go of it and come back to the riverbank. Every time you stop, let go, or step back and look and are aware that you are thinking. It can be as simple as saying to yourself, thinking, thinking. As soon as you label it as thinking, you're not as enmeshed with it as when you're not saying it. Those movements are very powerful. They only take a moment. They don't look so dramatic, but they are actually very big movements of the mind. They're beginning to break old habits. People have spent a lifetime of developing a habit of just letting themselves just ride the currents of their thoughts freely without any kind of choice, just going along. No wonder when you sit down and meditate, the mind wanders off in thoughts so easily because it's had so much freedom over a lifetime. Relearning and breaking the old habits goes relatively fast compared to how much time you spent freely thinking. We expect it to be by tomorrow, but it takes more than a couple of days. Every time you notice I'm thinking, every time you let go of thoughts, is a very meaningful moment. It has tremendous impact on breaking that habit. So meditation is content to do it whenever you is content to do it whenever you can. That's part of it. Sometimes it just seems like you do it and you get pulled into your thoughts so much. Sometimes you need to arouse a bit more determination, be a little bit more of a warrior. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to sit up straighter than usual, be alert, really pay attention. Even though I think meditation is supposed to make me calm, I'm not even going to try and make myself calm. I'm just going to really try and be alert to notice as soon as I wander off into thoughts. You start to get a handle on what's going on. Once you start getting a handle on it, then you can start relaxing. You might have to temporarily practice much more determination. Thinking is a hugely important part of human life. In meditation practice, one of the things we're trying to do is not be pulled along on these boats. One of the many reasons for that is that chances are pretty high that the stress we feel in our lives, the suffering we feel, the anxiety, and many things that we are trying to deal with through meditation are perpetuated or strengthened or catalyzed or triggered by what we're thinking about. As we start getting a handle on how to be mindful of thinking, it has a big impact on the rest of our life, the other aspects of our life. It's not always easy. Some people have a very hard time noticing anything to do with thinking. The thinking is very shy as soon as they bring their attention to focus on it. It just kind of evaporates. Some people have very little awareness of what they are thinking about. Some people, it's very clear. They live in their world of thoughts in a very clear way that's an important part of their lives. There are different ways of being. One is not better or worse or right or wrong. It's just how it is for us. When thinking arises in meditation and it's relatively easy to let go of it, then you are encouraged to just let go of it and come back to your breathing. Sooner or later, it's not going to be so easy to let go of your thinking. That takes two forms. One is you simply can't let it go of it. The mind is charging ahead thinking, doesn't want to stop at all. It can't just let go of it. The other, you might be able to let go momentarily, but as soon as you let go for a moment, it comes right back right away. It repeatedly comes back. If either one of those two things happen, then you want to quite contently let go of paying attention to your breathing and then focus on this phenomenon of thinking. Like looking at it right in the eye, thinking I see you. If you're here and the thinking is there, then you're free of it to some degree. If you are the thinking, you think you are the thoughts, then you're not outside of it. You're not on the riverbank. Look at it straight on, thinking, and saying the word thinking in your mind, very softly, gently. It can help you to look at it in the eye and say, I see you. I know this is what's going on now. So it's a very clear cognizance that thinking is going on. Sometimes this is enough for thinking to just evaporate. Part of the reason for that is that in order for thoughts to turn into thinking and persistent thinking, there has to be fuel for them to put energy into them. If you clearly see it for what it is, thinking, and give enough attention that is free of the thinking, in a way, you're not fueling it anymore. You're not involved in it anymore. If you're not involved, it dissipates usually, if it's relatively mild. Sometimes thinking is quite powerful. If you come to sit here and meditate and you just rob the local bank and the police are chasing after you, chances are you can't let go of the thoughts that easily. They would be spinning along really fast. Certain activities happen in your life and you can't put it to a stop. That's normal. In the task in meditation, there are two things you can do. You can keep letting go and come back to your breath and let the breath help calm you. As you get calmer, that energy of thinking might dissipate. The other thing you can do, you can actually turn and pay more careful attention to the phenomenon of thinking, the process of thinking, noticing different aspects of it as we did in the meditation we just did. For the purposes of meditation, generally we are almost never interested in the content, in the story which goes with the thinking. We don't focus on it. This is for other times and places, not for meditation. You can notice the physical aspect of it. And when I can't let go of my thinking very easily, I often find that there's a sense of pressure or tightness in the area I call my brain. If I can let go of my thoughts, and soon as I let go of it, if that pressure is there, I just pump out another thought. What helps me is if I go feel the tension in my brain, in my forehead, or in my eyes, wherever it might be, and relax it. If I relax it, then the pressure to think is not so great anymore. It's easier to let go of it. And after a while, I might not think so much. It's like this factory of tension or pressure or tightness. As long as it's there, its job is to pump out thoughts. You have to somehow address that. That's why it's very helpful when thinking is very powerful to look and see what's going on in the body. When you find something in the body, then you can let go of your thinking. Looking at your thoughts, then you just focus for a while on the physical aspect of it. The bodily things, tensions, do mindfulness on the body around that. If it's not easy to relax, don't make a big deal, an engineering project out of trying to relax. That's not meditation. If it's easy to relax, do it. If it's not easy, then be content that what we're doing is mindfulness, just being present for things, bringing our presence to be present, feel what it's like. As long as you're present, you're doing the practice. Nothing has to change. You don't have to fix anything. You just want to be present for how things are. There also can be an emotional aspect to the thinking. People who plan a lot in meditation, there's a very strong correlation, many of them. The planning arises out of anxiety, fear, or apprehension. There is some feeling of anxiety around the planning. There are other causes for planning as well. It can be excitement, or delight, or creativity, or different things, but the majority of times people find it has to do with some anxiety. In that case, the anxiety is the factory for the thinking. You can let go of your thoughts as much as you want, but the factory is still going to work overtime because the factory is on. What you need to do is then do mindfulness of emotions. Feel the fear, as we kind of went over last week. Fear, anxiety. Note it, be aware of it, and feel it in the body. All the things we talked about last week about emotions, you do that. It's like the thinking is the flag that says, hey, you, pay attention over here. Then we pay attention to the flag. But really, what the flag is saying is to pay attention to what is holding the flag, the factory, the emotion. So we can forget about the thoughts, come back and feel. Both the body, the physical sensations connected to the thinking, and the emotions happen in real time in the current here and now. Thinking also happens in the present moment, but often the content has to do with the past or the future. If you are connected to your body, to your emotions, you are here. If you are caught up in the world of your thoughts, in a sense, you might be somewhere else. We're trying to be here. The emotional aspect of thinking, the physical aspect of thinking, is a great support to be present, to being present. It helps anchor us in the present moment. There can also be energetic experiences with thinking. I find sometimes I can be sitting in meditation, very calm, very centered. My center of gravity, my center of being, of presence, seems to be down here. Very nice feeling. Then some really juicy thought will bubble up, and I'll get into that boat. And as I do that, get into that boat, get involved in it, I can feel that sense of aliveness, vitality, whatever I have, very quickly move up into my upper chest and sometimes into my head. I feel sometimes a little bit top heavy. This is where my aliveness, my vitality, the energy is up here. So then if I relax and let it go, sometimes I feel it go down again. When you're down here, your vitality, your energy is down lower. You're more balanced. Lower center of gravity feels more stable. It's easier to relax. It's interesting to watch how the sense of energy or vitality or aliveness in your body shifts and changes depending on what you're thinking about. Occasionally, it's useful to be more precise in your noting besides saying just thinking, thinking. If it's really obvious and you don't have to think about it, and you can just say planning, planning, you name it, or remembering, remembering, and just see it that way. It helps break the seduction of the involvement. There's one more aspect of thinking that is very helpful, that is a very helpful perspective on it. And that is part of the package of all the different things going on as we think. It's also our interest in it. You can notice as you track yourself thinking how interested you are you. Boy, am I ever interested. This is the best fantasy I've ever had. Or there could be a negative interest where you can be, oh, how can I be thinking this? A negative interest. We're caught in it and engaged in it. Sometimes it's the interest that perpetuates and fuels the thinking. Sometimes it's useful to note the degree of interest that might be there. Sometimes that interest has a physical feeling of reaching forward almost, leaning forward, holding on, wanting, getting involved. You can feel the mind sometimes almost lean into, grab onto, want to get involved in thinking. If it's relatively mild, the task is to let go of it. If it doesn't let go easily, then we very calmly include this in the meditation practice and note thinking, thinking. If it persists over time or keeps reoccurring over and over again, then very calmly stay in your place the best you can. Look around and notice what else is happening besides the content of what you're thinking about. Notice the physical aspects, the tension that might be there. If you're thinking a lot, the chances are that there is some tension, some pressure. Notice the emotions that are part of it. They can be pleasant emotions, they can be difficult ones. You don't want to be seduced by the pleasant ones. Finally, I get to have nice emotions. The pleasant ones will keep you caught up in thought as much as the difficult emotions. The purpose of mindfulness, which you are trying very hard to do, is not to get caught by anything. You don't want to get on the emotion boat either. You can do that at other times, but not in meditation, because there is something much more important to do in meditation. Then you can also notice the energy qualities connected to it, the intensity of it, the inner voice. Any of you surprised by the tone of your inner voice when you pay attention? At least one, 4, occasionally people who are surprised, they not only realize they are surprised by the tone, but by whose voice it is. They realize it's not their own. Sometimes it's a parent's voice, or sometimes it's some teacher, usually a difficult teacher that somehow they have internalized. Internalized different people. Sometimes these voices, we realize how much we get entangled also with other people in our inner mind. Sometimes seeing all this can help us become free of it. That's the task of meditation, to become free of all this. As you become freer, you'll become more relaxed, more at ease. You'll drop into deeper meditations as a consequence. Close your eyes. For a moment, connect to your belly or deep in your torso. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Don't think about the question, but see if some response bubbles up from inside. What would you be experiencing if you weren't thinking? Okay, what came up for you? What happens occasionally when you ask that kind of a question for people, sometimes the thinking is really a protection from feeling. Because if you think about stuff enough, make stories or fantasies, some people go to fantasies so they don't have to be present for life because life is difficult. You have feelings and emotions. And if we had difficult trauma in life, those emotions are deeply embedded in us. So sometimes when you ask that kind of a question, what we can find out is how much the incessant thinking is a protection that can open up an interesting door or window into what's going on. I'm not saying that's your case, but that's one of the things to notice. If you're very careful when you meditate, that you don't get caught in the trap of wanting something to go away, caught in the trap of judging and saying this shouldn't be there. The basic approach of mindfulness meditation is to know it and know it really well. A lot of wisdom comes from familiarity, which is bad news because familiarity means you have to hang on with it for a long time. For your case, you have to get really familiar with that part of yourself. So exploring in different ways can be really helpful. This is an example of something which is perhaps such a big part of you. It is also good to go talk with friends, go for a walk with friends, say, I have this interesting thing, this thinking mind that's incessant. Can I just talk about it and explore it with you? Ask you questions about it. Find different angles, different perspectives, get familiar with it. So there's one more thing. That is a lot. This is a lot, this thinking. I have a couple of more things to say. One is that if this seems too complicated, it's really enough for a really long time to just stay with the breath. You don't have to do all this exploration of thoughts if it seems too complicated. It's something to have in the back of your mind, and in its own time and place, hopefully you'll remember that instruction and it will become relevant. You don't have to be racing around trying to understand everything. Just keep steady and relaxed. Keep coming back to the breath. Use your breath. And when it's really compelling, your physical sensations, where they are compelling your emotions, compelling your world of thinking, you can begin exploring in this mindfulness way. But if you're exploring thinking, there is one more interesting phenomenon about thinking. If someone walked next to me, talking to me as much as I talk to myself, I'd worry about them. I would beg them to stop. I'd pay them to stop. I'd probably call the authorities because I'd be worried about them, and not only because they talk so much, but because it's so repetitive. I can't believe how much the person is saying the same thing over again and over again. What's going on? What's most amazing is that we can say the same thing to ourselves 500 times, and it can be as interesting the 500th time as the first time. We're the ones that should be reported to the authorities. We stay interested. A healthy person would lose interest. What is that interest like? What's it about? A high percentage of the time, the thinking, what keeps us interested, because a lot of those thoughts are self-referential. They have to do without our favorite subject, which is me, myself, and I. So the investigation of thoughts, it's also to look a little bit of looking at the content now. So to what degree is the content all about me? Just notice that. You don't have to judge it, say that it's bad or wrong. If you see how regular that is, just the awareness of that will begin shifting it. When you do mindfulness practice, you begin really valuing and loving noticing what's going on. Like you're a naturalist. Your field studies are yourself. So next, we're going to talk about something very different, somewhat very different, but very profound, which is mindfulness of the mind, with the idea that thinking is just a small little corner of the mind. The mind is much bigger. There's much more going on. So we will do that. So we will do mindfulness of the mind next week. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week and happy holidays.